Ah, good afternoon, Mr. Murphy. It's been a long time. I would like a tasting. Let us see what we can pair for you. Why don't you just take the PPQ long slide with the Leopold Delta Point, Mr. Murphy? Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, the PPQ long slide's the best choice. Can I see that MB5SD again, though? I'm just not completely sold on the AR9 yet. For the love of God, man, make a choice.
All right, guys, Murph's here. And today, at viewer request, we're going to talk about what would constitute my ideal arsenal. As we can see here, I've brought out many examples, but not everything we're going to talk about is necessarily going to be here on the couch or on the coffee table, present for the discussion here today. Let's get into how it is that this subject came about and how it is that I kind of broke down what it is that I'm doing. So a viewer requested on the channel that I discuss what my ideal arsenal would look like. And this is very akin to whenever it is that people ask me, like, what's my favorite gun? That is an incredibly difficult thing to pare down. I like a lot of different things. I have very eclectic tastes. I like military surplus guns. I like tactical guns. I like sporting arms. All these different types of like historical or engineering aspects of firearms that I actually really enjoy. So generally, whenever people ask me that, I tell them that they have to pare down that list. They have to be a lot more specific. So they might say, what's your favorite gun that you own? And that's like trying to ask me which one's my favorite kid. Like, that's just not going to work out. We still need to break it down by category. So I kind of pushed this person or prompted this person to kind of help me pare down the listing a little bit. And the feedback that I got pretty much was how I interpret it was to pick some things that are relevant to me in my firearms life here today, and then make a video about guns that would fulfill those niches. Now, the interesting thing about that is that if you asked me this question 15 years ago, you would have gotten a very different answer. And if you asked me this question in another month, you would probably get a very different answer. I have already a fairly decent sized firearms collection, and still I want to grow it. And I'm really probably past the point where I actually need more guns. Shh, don't say that too loud. Don't tell anybody that I said it. Because I pretty much have something to cover most situations or circumstances as it is. However, guns are my passion. I'm interested in their history, their design aspects, where it is that they were used, all those types of things, as well as the practical application. Those are things that really get me going. And that's why I started a YouTube channel, was to be able to talk about this type of stuff, because I enjoy this subject so much. I'm passionate about it, and I want to reach out and get in touch with like-minded people. I don't make money doing this type of stuff. In fact, this channel only costs me money, but it's money that I would spend anyway because I only go after things that I find interesting to begin with. It would appear that Leia has found her toy. So, I have an extensive firearms list that does go through and identify specific firearms that I want to get a hold of, as well as having very vague categories, as like guns I grew up with, guns that I've worked around, military surplus guns. Like those are just overarching categories. If I find something in those categories, then it's something that I'm willing to purchase. And I don't necessarily have an order of precedence for my list. I go and I shop and I find something that I like, and if it's a good price, then I'm going to pick it up. But nothing in my list actually like rack or stacks anything for importance and all those types of things. So you can see where this would become a very difficult thing for me to pare down. Identifying things that I'm interested in or niches that I'm trying to fulfill right now in my own collection, that is how I found the best way to be able to go about this. Now, if you asked me this 15 years ago, like when I was a kid or something along those lines, I would have picked out a lot more sporting type arms. When I was a kid, we shot a lot of like trap. We did a lot of upland game hunting. When we hunted big game like deer, you could only hunt with either slugs for a very small portion of the hunting season, and then black powder for also a very short portion of the hunting season. Like those were the types of things that were interesting, that were like engaging for me. Those were the things I was engaged in at the time. Now, as I've gotten older, and I've always had an interest in like tactical arms and all that kind of stuff, but as I've gotten older, my interest as well as my proficiency in such arms has increased, and that's more and more what my collection has become tailored towards. So this video is going to cover some of the nostalgic type things for me, as well as indulging in my more current interests, all under the umbrella of things that I find interesting in general. Leia. You've got quieter toys. Yes, thank you for the big blinks. All right, back on track. Sorry. All right, so with that, why don't we go ahead and start indulging in these subjects? And I did want to go ahead and kind of touch back to my roots. So, guns that I would be willing to shoot for trap. Starting off with this Sears Model 20, chambered in 12 gauge. Previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. This is an heirloom shotgun in my family. This was my great-grandfather's, and I have hunted and shot an extensive amount of trap with this particular shotgun. A lot of these guns have been previously reviewed on the channel and will be linked in the description. Now, also, this Remington 870 Express, also chambered in 12 gauge. This has been a long-standing waterfowl shotgun for me, as well as something that I still enjoy shooting on the trap range. And then also, where did it go? Oh, it's right over here. This Winchester Model 1200, chambered in 20 gauge. This was actually my very first gun. This was another heirloom firearm in my family. It's so difficult to put everything back. We'll put that there. These three shotguns are the three guns that I've always consistently connected with the best. If I was having trouble, Leia. If I was having trouble connecting out on the trap line for whatever reason, just seems like I was missing everything, any one of these three shotguns would get me right back in the confidence boost. I've always been able to connect with them very well, track with them very well, shoot with them very well. Now, not always, some days maybe I wasn't connecting the best with the Express, but I was connecting pretty well with the Model 20 and vice versa. But still, these were guns that one of them was going to fit the bill whenever it was that I was struggling. And for that is why I would want to keep them in my collection. Now, it's unlikely that I'll ever go back to hunting upland game, but if I did, any one of these guns would be perfectly acceptable for that purpose. I have hunted with these guns with upland game and waterfowl. Well, this one, waterfowl, not so much the other two, and have done so successfully in my youth. Now, in addition to that, you'll note that there's no 16 gauges, and longtime viewers of the channel know that I'm a huge fan of the 16 gauge. I've reviewed multiple 16 gauge shotguns, as well as done a video discussing the 16 gauge shotgun shell. Interested in that, link in the description. And you'll note that I did not pick out any 16 gauge shotguns for this list. As much as I enjoy the 16 gauge shotgun shell, and I think it's a fine field shell, and it's definitely one of the better options for upland game, I struggle to think of very many 16 gauge shotguns that I've connected with in the same way as the three shotguns that I just listed. So that is what drove that decision in this case. Again, ask me in a month, and that list might change. All right, so there's our trap options. What about hunting? Now, as much as I don't necessarily hunt a lot anymore, I do still have aspirations of hunting big game like elk or, ram, sheep, all that kind of stuff, as well as still hunting like white-tailed deer and all those types of things. So, with that being the case, I picked out two guns that I would like for this purpose. The first would be a Winchester Model 70 featherweight, chambered in 7mm .8. Okay, interesting, Murph. Interesting. Why the featherweight? Well, the Winchester Model 70 has always been very interesting to me. The pre-64 models used a Mauser-style bolt, and then after 1964, they went to a push feed in order to be able to compete with the Remington Model 700. In 2012, they went back to a controlled feed bolt. So this is kind of capturing the history type aspect of things that I really enjoy, as well as the featherweight having the very classic wood stock and wood and steel look to it and all those types of things. This would be a very classic hunting rifle to me, but not necessarily something that I would want to take into extreme weather because it is wood. Wood swells. It doesn't necessarily respond very well to cold. So if I were to take it in, I would not necessarily want to take it into more extreme hunting conditions in the pursuit of elk or any of those types of animals. But it would be just fine on deer, especially with the 7mm .08, which I like 7mm cartridges. I like the flatter shooting trajectories, a little bit lighter recoil on all that kind of stuff. And this would be something that would be more than capable of taking white-tailed deer out east, where shots are relatively short to begin with, and you're still going to be packing a lot of energy on a fairly flat shooting trajectory. Now, I really juggled a lot of options here. I thought about the 270 Winchester, previously discussed on the channel, link in the description. And I'm a huge fan of the 270 Winchester. But I also did a video at viewer request on the 7mm 08, which if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description to that cartridge discussion video. And I found the data on that cartridge to be interesting enough that I would be willing to accept it for this purpose. All right, well, what about your more extreme hunting rifle? Well, for this, I selected the Savage 110 Storm. Synthetic stock, stainless steel barrel, fairly light profile to both. Something that I would enjoy being able to, well, maybe not, enjoy is probably the wrong word if you're talking about, some serious conditions hunting, but something that would not necessarily inhibit me in my pursuit of larger game in austere conditions. And this gun I chose to be chambered in 30-06. Now, Murph, why did you pick a FUD cartridge like the 30-06? What is wrong with you? First off, let's not dump too hard on the 30-06. While there are a lot of cartridges out on the market that do fantastic things and are perhaps better suited for longer distance shooting, the 30-06 has been a mainstay in American shooting culture for a reason. There is little that you cannot do with a 30-06. You can get loadings as low as like 90 grains all the way up to like 220 grains. You can do a lot and hunt everything in North America with the 30-06, making it a fantastic utilitarian option within a collection. Now, of course, I tried not to spend too much time focusing on like one-size-fits-all solutions or utilitarian aspects and all that kind of stuff, but I grew up with a love affair for the 30-06, of course, because I was interested in World War II like every other kid my age. So the M1 Garand, the 1903 Springfield, those were the guns, and the 30-06 was the cartridge. In addition to the fact that my dad, being a bit of a FUD himself, definitely espoused the values of the 30-06 and its capabilities, placing it well above the 308 and many other cartridges. Now, why not 6.5 Creedmoor in this case? While I think the 6.5 Creedmoor is an excellent cartridge, also previously discussed in the channel, link in the description, it is not necessarily the greatest cartridge in the world. It does some things really, really well, and we'll talk about that more later, but for hunting type purposes, the 6.5 Creedmoor has some limitations that have to be taken into account, whereas the 30-06, I might have more drop associated with it, but I'm also carrying a lot more energy. And at some point, active ballistics like that is more important than passive ballistics, especially when you're pursuing big game at potentially longer distances. All right, guys, that's enough on that. Why don't we go ahead and now get into things perhaps more in line with my current interests, fighting rifles. Right off the bat, a Mark 18. If I have to, the actual Daniel Defense Mark 18 SBR. Longtime viewers of the channel know that I have zero issues with building out SBRs and going through the tax stamp process and all those types of things. I want whatever it is that I can legally have. And if I can legally have an SBR with just a little bit more paperwork, that's fine by me. I will do whatever it is that it takes to possess the things that I have and not necessarily get my dog shot. So the Mark 18 will be set up more as like a night fighter. And actually, in my day job, I really wish I had a Mark 18. But as it turns out, that's just not in the cards. So I would want this thing set up with some sort of IR designator, like a D-ball, and a Surefire like M300 with the IR setting, and also paired with like a suppressor, like a Recce 2 or something along those lines. Because, of course, we're talking about my arsenal. I can set up my arsenal. In this case, money's not necessarily a limitation any way I want. And in this fictitious arsenal, I also have night vision. I've been wanting to get into night vision. I've been wanting to build a night fighter. A couple of things that are kind of holding me back. First off, night vision, insanely expensive. Second off, actually having a place to shoot it. And furthermore, because right now I do have access to several of the, I can borrow several of the things to be able to put together like a night shooting video. I also don't really have the ability to film at night. So things that I'm still working through here on the channel, and perhaps teasers of things to come in the future. So Mark 18, absolutely. I would also like a 13.5 inch AR pistol. Now, of course, the ATF keeps going back and forth on, and the courts are also going back and forth on what constitutes an SBR and what constitutes a pistol. And I believe, if I remember correctly, at least at this snapshot in time, we're back onto you can put braces on your guns and they're not SBRs. I would like a 13.5 pistol because first off, I like 13.5 inch length. I think it's a very good trade-off between velocity, weight, and length, and all those types of things, to where you're still getting very good performance out of the AR-15, out of something that's a little bit more compact and doesn't necessarily weigh as much, is closer to your center of gravity and all those types of things, than like a 16-inch gun. And I want it in a pistol format so that I can cross state borders with it should I so choose. If I want to go to a course somewhere, or I want to have it readily available, perhaps I want to swap it in as a truck gun or something along those lines. But we're not talking about truck guns yet. Keep that in mind. So, a 13.5 pistol, probably built on an Aero Precision lower. Doesn't really matter. I just want that classification satisfied there. Now, for a 16-inch gun, I would go with this LWRC M6 IC-A5, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. This is an absolutely fantastic rifle. External gas piston and incredibly well balanced for an external gas piston gun. So, absolutely would have a place in my ideal arsenal. And then, of course, it's a 16-inch gun. I can take it wherever it is that I want. I don't really have a lot of limitations. If somebody has a limitation against a 16-inch gun, they probably just have a limitation against AR-15s in general. Now, getting into guns that aren't AR-15s, because as much as I love the AR-15 platform, I have an extensive amount of training with it. I have an extensive amount of experience with it. It's very natural. It's very easy to work around and all those types of things. I also enjoy working with other rifle platforms like this ZPAP M70, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. Also update reviewed, which will also be linked in the description. This rifle is a lot of fun to work around. Of course, it's not a true AK. It is technically an AK variant and all those types of things. This would 100% be on my short list, let alone my arsenal list. Huge fan of that setup. Now, of course, that's chambered in 7.62x39, and the 7.62x39 is the classic AK chambering. However, I have also had a mean urge to pick up a 5.45 AK. So in this case, I would like to add an Arsenal SLR 104 FR to the list. Probably equip it in many of the same ways as I did the ZPAP that we just looked at, and build it out as a fighting rifle. Get some sort of rail on there to allow me to be able to get a light position where it is that I want it, get an optic on there, sling, all those types of things. Nothing too crazy necessarily, but something that I could utilize for practical purposes chambered in the 5.45 cartridge. I don't know why. I really like the 5.45. I think it'd be really neat to have a 5.45 AK, and at some point, hopefully in the future, in the not too distant future, I'll be able to satisfy that itch. All right. From there, we finish out the fighting rifle category with a true battle rifle being the Scar Heavy, or the Scar 17. I have been trying to talk myself into a Scar 17 for a really long time. And while money's not necessarily an object in this discussion, it's still a consideration as far as what are you getting for your value. One of my biggest issues with the Scar 17 is that they are $3,500 easy, and there's still modifications that you need to make to them in order for them to be a truly practical fighting rifle, which are a couple $100 more each. And like if you're talking about handguards, if you're talking about the lower, the stock, all those types of things, those things are expensive on an already incredibly expensive gun. However, it's very difficult for me to deny the fact that of battle rifles, the Scar 17 is probably the best that has ever been produced. And its value is more easy for me to be able to recognize, or at least conceptualize, than perhaps the cost of like the SIG MCX Spear. The MCX in general has only been appreciating in price as SIG has rolled out more and more models, and I'm really confused how that is. The rifle was never particularly inexpensive to begin with, and initially I always chalked that up to the fact of like, well, yeah, you know, research and development and all that kind of stuff's expensive, and you know, you're gonna have to cop that cost somewhere, you know, recoup the money spent and all those types of things at some point. And on top of that, you know, it has some of the AR-15 versatility, but it's also very individual in its own way, so you're going to have to develop the aftermarket in order to be able to really accommodate the rifle. But the MCX has become a mainstay for SWAT teams and Special Forces units all around the world. They're making money on contracts, and now there's plenty of aftermarket support for the MCX. I don't understand why prices have only been going up. I think it's because SIG hates you in a manner very similar to HK, is what it appears. Doesn't change the fact that I like both companies. I'm just saying, like, there's some interesting practices going on there when it comes to pricing. All right, so Scar Heavy, probably with a 1-6 on it, built out as something that would truly thrive as a battle rifle. All right, so now why don't we go ahead and get into truck guns. Starting off with an underfolder AK. You cannot deny the fact that an underfolder AK is incredibly compact. Like this Polish kit build. Here, chambered in 7.62 by 3.9. So take this, update it so that you can mount a light and an optic and all that kind of stuff, and then this would become a very light, a very handy, and a very compact truck gun option. I've really been toying with the idea of modifying out this rifle for such a purpose. I haven't said no. I also haven't told myself yes yet. Actually, I'm gonna need access to that console here in a second. All right, guys. This is definitely going to be a very long video, so I hope that if you guys have gotten bored in any portion of this, you've already checked out the chapter selection and jumped to where it is that you want to be. Imagine if I actually listed out every gun ever that I wanted. Be here for a long time. All right. The IWI X95 Tavor, previously reviewed on the channel, linked in the description. This is one of my favorite truck guns. It is incredibly compact while still sporting a 16-inch barrel. I have no transportation restrictions or anything along those lines. And it has a somewhat similar manual of arms to an AR-15 while also having some advantages when it comes to like mag changes off the shoulder and all that kind of stuff. Definitely a solid contender in my fictitious optimal arsenal. Okay. Now, also the Scar Light, the Scar 16, which generally is about $500 to $1,000 cheaper than the Scar 17. It's kind of the forgotten Scar, the redheaded stepchild, if you will. Not a lot of people seem to have had an interest in the 5.56 Scar 17 or Scar 16, excuse me, when they could just go and get an AR-15, and I understand that. However, I like the side folding stock and all that kind of stuff because that's something that I look for in a truck gun, and for those types of purposes, the Scar 16 would actually work out fantastically for the truck gun concept. Pair it with the appropriate optic and light and all that kind of stuff, and it's ready to go as a fighting rifle. Also, this Maverick 88 build, previously reviewed and update reviewed on the channel. Go ahead and check out the links in the description. This is maybe not necessarily the greatest or prettiest shotgun in the world, but when it comes to my purposes of having a compact shotgun setup that I can then open up and also be able to take to more states than an AR-15, this gun is a pretty awesome option in that situation, in that circumstance. All right, along with that, of course, longtime viewers of the channel know that whenever it is that I go on long trips, I like to have some sort of handgun available that I use for truck defense, something that I keep in like a center console or something along those lines. More accessible to me than the gun that I'm probably wearing at the 3 to 4 o'clock position and is going to be behind like a seatbelt. And for this, I chose the Glock 17. Glock 17 is one of those just cookie cutter pistols. It's how typical Glocks are. They just work. And the 17 being a full-size handgun, I can go ahead and pair with a light. If I wanted to, I'd get like the MOS and pair it with an optic as well. And then that is something that definitely would be supported by a vehicle platform, maybe not necessarily as much on body carry in a concealed carry type concept. So generally for truck guns, I want it to be a larger gun. I want it to be, I'm fighting my way to something that is larger and more capable. So the 17 in this case would facilitate that. I can pair it with larger magazines, be it flush capacity or the extended magazines, and also be able to have more fight enhancing accessories added to it, and the light and the pistol optic and all that kind of stuff. All right, so going from there, I want to go ahead and get into my CCW options. My number one favorite deep carry option is the Glock 42, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. Fantastic little 380 handgun. It's got the best sights of a gun its size on the market, and it's incredibly slim, light, and compact, making it something that if I'm running around in shorts or something along those lines, I can easily conceal it and actually conceal it, which is really important to me in a concealed carry handgun. I want to carry the largest gun that I can not print with. Glock 42 is the smallest option, but will work in the lightest amount of clothing. All right, going from the Glock 42, we go to the Glock 43X, chambered in 9mm. I'm a huge fan of this handgun. I've carried this for quite a few years. It's slim. It has a little bit higher capacity than what you would find on the 43X. I have shot this gun in competitions. I actually took third place in a pistol competition with this particular handgun. Definitely kind of like working my way up. This would be the next smallest option that I would want to carry. Going from there, we come to the Glock 26. Actually, I just unloaded and pulled this out of the holster not too long ago because I have been carrying this here recently. This is fantastic because I have higher capacity that I can work with other options. Say if I'm on that road trip and I have that Glock 17 with me, I can go ahead and run Glock 17 magazines in this. Not the other way around, but at the very least I can keep this gun fed in a circumstance that I need to keep this gun fed for whatever reason. So, Glock 26, always a standby and devout favorite out of my firearms collection. Going from the 26 and going our next level up, we talk about the Glock 19. Previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description, though this is my Glock 19M that I have not yet reviewed. So, Glock 19 is one of the most popular carry handguns in the United States. It's an incredibly popular military firearm, police firearm, all that kind of stuff. Again, I have the magazine interchangeability, so if I was carrying this and then also had a Glock 26 available, like say on a road trip or something like that, I'm going out of state, I can switch magazines into the Glock 20. I can keep the 26 fed with the 19 magazines, as well as it's just a really good Goldilocks size of a gun. So, the Glock 19, and from there, going into a Glock 19X MOS. When the Glock 19X first came out, it was incredibly controversial, and I didn't necessarily get the controversy of it because I understand that a longer grip and a shorter barrel allows you to better control the handgun. That's been my experience with it. So, pairing that with the MOS gives me the ability to be able to have an optic and then throw a light on there, and that kind of becomes like my largest carry option. Because my goal is to carry the largest gun that I can effectively conceal without printing. So, everything in my day would start with trying to conceal carry a Glock 19X MOS, as previously mentioned, outfitted, and then from there go down to my 19, and from there go down to my 26, and from there go to my 43X, and then wind up at my 42, and the 42 is going to be the cutoff. If anything beyond that, looks like I'm just not going out today. So those are my concealed carry options. Why don't we go ahead and start talking about fighting handguns? Now, these would be handguns that I would be willing to take into a fight. I know I'm going into a fight and, or a duty type application, and I want this type of handgun present. Starting off with this SIG P226 double action Kellerman. This one chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson. This is really just supposed to be a placeholder. What I would actually like to see is a SIG P226 chambered in 357 SIG, which at some point I will probably adapt this gun over to. I might also switch this from a double action Kellerman over to an actual DASA gun. Haven't actually made that decision yet. You can see here, this gun's also sporting the TLR-1S from Streamlight. So, I like SIG steel framed handguns. I like the 357 SIG, and I always felt that the two should be combined. So at some point, I would like to add that to my collection, and that is what would be as a fighting handgun option in my fictitious ideal arsenal. All right, from there, we go to the venerable Glock 34. Also previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. This is a gun that I have competed with. I have taken it to courses and stuff like that, and I am incredibly confident with this firearm. This would be a no problem go-to fighting option for me. Probably one of the larger fighting options that I would want to take with me. You guys haven't noticed the theme. I like Glocks, like a lot. Did a whole video on that, linked in the description. All right, so from there, we go to the Glock 17L Gen 5, which would be slightly longer than a Glock 34. I'm so excited that they came out with the 17L and the Gen 5. Pairing the 17L with an optics-ready system is just brilliant. Like, I thought the 17L was pretty much dead at Gen 3, but here it is resurrected in Gen 5, and I've handled a couple in gun shops, and they are quite nice. So I would love to add that to the collection as well. Now, no fighting handgun collection is complete without a 45 ACP. In this case, the HK USP 45. Made famous for Tom Cruise's use of it in the movie Collateral. Absolutely honking handgun. But high capacity for 45 ACP. HK's proven indestructible design and all those types of things. HK USP 45 is where it's at. Definitely a fantastic full-size fighting handgun option. And then to round it all off with the FN57, chambered in 5.7 by 28. Previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. Now, some people, 5.7's got a little bit of controversy surrounding it, especially since you can't necessarily get a hold of the AP ammunition anymore, so it's kind of like, what's the point? But if I could get a hold of that AP ammunition, which again, arsenal setup in any way it is that I want it, this would be a really fantastic option if you felt that you're going to be going up against body armor, which is the only thing that I find interesting about the 5.7. As far as its ballistics and all those types of things are concerned, it doesn't really carry the mass in order to be able to really achieve the ballistic capabilities that we're talking about. Though Henry at 9-Hole Reviews took a PS90 out to an astounding distance, like 300 meters accurately. So, of course, you're also talking about a 40 grain projectile at 300 meters. Like, how much energy are you really packing at that point? When you're talking about like his performance at 150 to 200, he had no shift in point of aim, point of impact, which is pretty impressive. At the end of the day, if you're facing somebody with body armor, being able to put holes through body armor is better than not. Now, there's a lot of other ways that you can handle somebody in body armor, but you can still do those same methods with a 5.7 while having the whole body be your target. So people talk about like, oh, we can go for the pelvic girdle, or you can go for headshots or anything along those lines. Absolutely, you can do that with a 9mm or 40 or a 45. You have that type of option available to you. But wouldn't it be really great if you could also still shoot center mass and get target effect? And then switch to pelvic if it's not necessarily working out for you, or then go to Mozambique if it's not necessarily working out for you. That's what's available to be targeted. Just saying. It brings some interesting options. It's just not an end-all, be-all that some people make it out to be. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about home defense type setups. A 300 blackout integrally suppressed AR. That's something that actually I'm going to wind up modifying my Splendid Gerbil, which previously reviewed and update reviewed on the channel. I forgot to bring it down. I'll roll in a picture of it. But that being a very short 300 blackout setup, pairing it with a suppressor would make it an absolute fantastic option in a home defense situation. Already with a 6.5-inch barrel, I can pie corners all day long, regardless of how tight the space is. Add a suppressor, adds a little bit of length, but not necessarily detrimentally so, especially in my current living conditions. So the 300 blackout, when paired with a suppressor, is an absolutely fantastic option. And as I discussed in the 300 blackout video, which if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description. They are fantastic to be paired with SBRs in general, because they are meant to be fired out of shorter barrels. So something to consider there. The venerable Mossberg 500, like this model here, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. Chambered in 12 gauge, this has been a time-honored home defense shotgun in many homes, my own included. So, of course, no home defense situation is necessarily complete or no home defense loadout is complete without a shotgun, even if shotguns are not necessarily my favorite option. I understand that they have a versatility and utility associated with them. I just prefer rifles, and that's just based solely on my experience. But if I brought in a Mossberg 500, I'd definitely be willing to bring in a Benelli M4 because the Benelli M4 is just cool. And I'm hopefully getting one for review on the channel here after a little bit. Spoilers though. So Benelli M4, pop an optic on that bad boy, make some changes in order to be able to increase capacity while still staying on the correct side of 922R compliance, get a light on there, all those types of things. And now you've got your John Wick blaster. Now, in addition to that, home defense, you can also get an unholy pairing of both rifle handling along with a pistol cartridge in the form of the MP5. Now, of course, the MP5 is a time-honored and much beloved submachine gun. In this case, we're not necessarily talking about a submachine gun as much as we're talking about like an SP5 or any of the other imported versions of the MP5. But get it modernized with at least a light rail, if not an optic as well, in order to be able to make it more applicable to your purposes. This is something that I would be fine with it being a pistol or an SBR. It doesn't really matter to me one way or another. It's just a matter of $200. Now also, to round out the home defense setup would be a bedside gun for me, which would be the Glock 22, but a very specific Glock 22. Several years ago, I did a range with the Special Forces team, and they pulled out a suppressed Glock 22, kind of like almost like a Mark 23 light at that point. So suppressor height night sights, threaded barrel, all those types of things. The whole idea was that the team that I was on that range with that particular day were from the CRIF, from 10th Group's CRIF, actually. And they were more or less modeling after something that CAG had done for a little while, which was to utilize suppressed 40 Smith & Wesson handguns. Now that thing seems to have gone away, but that was something that was being experimented with at one time. And as I mentioned before, on my firearms list, I am interested in guns that I have at some point worked around, which would include a suppressed Glock 22. I think that'd be a pretty fantastic home defense handgun. Now, of course, in home defense type situations, there's a discussion of whether or not you should use a suppressor. Do you want the world to know that you're in the middle of a gunfight, please call the police? Or do you want to just go ahead and handle the situation and then call the police on your terms? It's 6 of one, half a dozen of me. 6 of one, half a dozen of another to me. However, firing, especially a long gun indoors, is quite loud and could potentially compromise yours and your family's situational awareness. So that's something to keep in mind there if you're potentially dealing with multiple attackers. All right, that rounds out our home defense section. Why don't we go ahead and talk about competition? Now, right now, guys, the competitions that I shoot are IDPA, so the guns that I picked are supposed to accommodate the IDPA rules. So, starting off with this SIG M11A1, chambered in 9mm. This is an absolutely fantastic gun. This has a lot of the SIG Legion features without the SIG Legion price tag. So SRT trigger, SIG X-ray night sights, all that kind of stuff. And this gun, I generally place in the top 3 whenever it is that I compete with this handgun in my division. So I would be remiss to not include the M11A1. Now, I would also be remiss to not include a Beretta M9 because I have a ton of Beretta M9 magazines and I even have some holsters. Now, it wouldn't necessarily be for the concealed carry side of IDPA. I would instead utilize my duty belt exemption and grab my work belt, throw my old M9 holster on there, and then run that gun in that manner. That would not bug me at all. Sure, older M9s that have had a lot of rounds ripped through them had a lot of issues. The military well documented that. However, guns that are well maintained and aren't necessarily abused with plus P ammunition in the thousands perform quite well. So I don't have the hatred that a lot of people extend towards the M9. I remember when the Beretta Model 92 FS was the gun in movies and police holsters and all that kind of stuff, though I was kind of at the tail end of the police holsters. You know, at a time where like SIGs were getting more adopted as well as Glocks, the transition of American law enforcement to the Glock. Now, to go along with the competition type mindset, and especially IDPA, be a 1911, but not just any 1911, something chambered not in 45 ACP. And if I was to be completely honest, it would be 38 Super. I find the 38 Super cartridge to be really neat. I don't necessarily think it does anything better than 9mm, but it's still, especially when paired with the 1911, something about that just seems kind of classic. And it kind of gets back to my eclectic nature whenever it comes to my firearm tastes. And to round out the competition section, I would really like a PPQ long slide. I would probably also utilize my duty belt advantage. And I remember years ago, I was looking at a PPQ long slide chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson. That was actually really, I was going to pull the trigger on it. But it was right before Black Friday. So I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll wait until Black Friday. This already fairly decent price should go down, and then bing, bang, boom, I'll buy the gun. Black Friday came, and the sticker price went up to then have the sale price come to not what it was before the sticker price changed. And I was very upset. So, still a little mad, but that would be something that I would be interested in doing yet again. Now, does the 40 Smith & Wesson hold that much interest? At one time, I was a huge fan of the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge. You know, you get the capacity of a 9mm, and you get the knockdown power of a 45 and all that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily still believe that, but I also don't believe that any particular handgun cartridge holds sway over another when it comes to ballistics and all those types of things. So aside from the fact that the 40 Smith & Wesson's kind of a snappy cartridge and all that kind of stuff, it really doesn't bug me, especially in a full-size handgun, to have a 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, clearly, I have the SIG 226, which is actually chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson. I haven't changed it to 357 SIG yet. I have an MP 2.0 chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson. I have a Glock 23, and I have designs to get more 40 Smith & Wesson handguns. 40 Smith & Wesson does not dissuade me. It just doesn't necessarily encourage me either. Now, I've talked about that in the 40 Smith & Wesson compromise video, which if you're interested in that, I'll put the link in the description. All right, let's talk about some long-range guns. Now, I don't spend a lot of time shooting at long range because I don't really have access to long ranges to shoot at, but I still have an interest in long-range shooting. So, I'll go ahead and open up the space a little bit. Things like my Mark 12 SPR, previously reviewed and update reviewed on the channel, linked in the description. This is my build gun, and this is something that I would want to see as a standard or as a go-to in my ideal arsenal. So, this Mark 12 clone, or this, well, not necessarily a faithful clone. I wouldn't mind seeing something that's maybe a little bit more faithful to the original, but I have a whole separate section for, you know, eclectic things like that. In addition to that, I would like an M110 to be able to utilize as a DMR. PSA is producing a version of the M110. I have a little bit of an issue with being able to trust PSA products because they, as much as they come out with innovative stuff, or at the very least they're trying to give the public what they want at a price that you can actually afford, they do that at the cost of quality control. They use the public for quality control. And while they're very good about making changes to guns, about fixing guns and making updates and coming out with new generations and all that kind of stuff, they're very reactive in what it is that they're doing. With not doing the QC beforehand, they don't catch the issues, and then you wind up being caught flat-footed with them later. All right, the M14 EBR. And the only reason I want an M14 EBR is because I have worked with the EBR before, and I have a lot of nostalgia based around that particular rifle. The M14 on its own is a beautiful rifle. I don't necessarily think it's a better rifle than anything else out there. It is entirely nostalgia that makes me want to have an M14 EBR in my collection. And that's okay, I can do that, it's my collection. But the most serious long-range gun that I have listed here would be the Bergara B14 HMR. And I would want that chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, because to me, that is the best use of the 6.5 Creedmoors when you're talking about longer range shooting, probably in either PRS or on people. The 6.5 Creedmoor is designed for long-range shooting, not necessarily designed for hunting, though it can be utilized in that application. You do still have energy issues once you start going after really big game. So that's where I think the Bergara would be a better like PRS option, and kind of like a plug-and-play PRS option at that. All right, why don't we go ahead and talk about some retro guns. Starting off, the Gordy carbine or any type of Black Hawk Down build. So getting into that, you know, kind of eclectic like Colt 723, whatever type of build. You've got, you know, your lights attached with like rubber hose and carry handle optics and all that kind of stuff. That type of rifle. I've been kicking around the idea for a build for one. A friend of mine offered me an upper a while ago that has a carry handle and kind of has that like Black Hawk Down or Blood Diamond type look to it for like a Car 15. I just don't have a lower to pair it with yet, and I'm purely waiting on that before I hit him up and like, yo, let me get that upper. The unfortunate thing is when you have as many like interests and directions as you could go as I do, you wind up kind of just like grasping at straws to be able to decide what it is that you want to go after. All right, now the M16A1 and the M16A2, let's go ahead and lump these two together. I love the triangular handguards and light barrel profile of the M16A1. I think that's just super cool. And Brownells is producing a variety of period correct M16A1s now. So I would definitely like to have one of those in the collection, as well as the M16A2. I have a profound amount of sentiment associated with the M16A2. I think that the M16A2 is a really cool layout and all that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily practical, but the M16A2 has popped up in very pivotal portions of my life in the past. So I would like to be able to have that, and I would actually like to be able to run like the elbow mount with an M68 on there, and then also clip like a PEC 2 into the circular cutouts and the handguard and stuff like that, because that is something that I rocked for a very short period of time once upon a time. So another little nostalgia type setup, but I can't help it. I really want to see it. All right, the FAL. Be it DSA or kit build or whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. I would definitely like to have the right arm of the free world represented in my collection. I'm not necessarily sold on battle rifles like we talked about before, but I do think they're applicable, and you just can't deny that democracy was defended or expanded by the FAL. Along with the G3. G3s have been something that have popped up consistently throughout my, firearms interest and a variety of different price points and stuff like that. I almost picked up a G3 a couple of years ago. I was bouncing back and forth around that while I was on a business trip in Virginia. Ultimately, I wound up going with the ZPAP, and I have no regrets in that case. But the G3 is something that is one of those guns that I've bypassed to go after other deals that were just a little bit better, and I've been waiting for the right deal for a G3 to come along. The Galil, the original Galil. As a kid, I thought the original Galil was the coolest gun. Upswept charging handle, built-in bipod, built-in night sights, based on an AK and all that kind of stuff. Super cool option. So I would like the 5.56 original Galil. I really want one of those in my collection. I'm just chomping at the bit to find one for the right price. And I've passed on one that I really probably should have bought, but everybody's gun collection has quite a few regrets laced into them. The AUG, the Steyr AUG. It's not a terribly practical rifle. It's definitely not something that's readily or easily adapted to fighting type concepts, current fighting type concepts. But Die Hard, okay, and Commando had a brief appearance in Commando in the hands of the bad guy, and a whole bunch of other movies. The AUG's cool. Video games, all that kind of stuff. The AUG is cool, and I would definitely like to add one to my collection. Again, I've passed on a couple that I wish I hadn't. A wood-stocked Mini 14. I grew up on the Mini 14. It was actually the first 5.56 rifle I ever shot. And also previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description, for my Mini 14 Tactical that I had at one point. That was actually the first tactical rifle that I ever bought myself. I would not necessarily go the tactical route again on the Mini 14, at least not with the ATI stock and all that kind of stuff, but I would have another Mini 14 just to kind of scratch that personal nostalgia itch that I so frequently discuss in my videos. A 1911, but this time chambered in 45 ACP, something that looks more like an original GI 1911, kind of like this. This is a Springfield Army 1911A1. This is not necessarily a dead ringer for a GI style 1911, but it's the closest thing I've got to kind of satisfy that appearance here in the video. Now, going along with that, now we're going to get into a bunch of revolvers. The Smith & Wesson Model 10. Smith & Wesson Model 10 is my favorite .38 special revolver ever produced. I absolutely love the Model 10. I love its lines. I love its lock work. I had a 6-inch barrel Model 10 for a little while, long before I started the channel, and I traded it away, and I frequently regret that. And at some point, I will need to add another Model 10 to the collection. It seems like they've been appreciating in price, which is really annoying to me, because I remember that I passed on quite a few that were like $350 to $400. I was just looking at other stuff at the time. The Colt Python, the iconic Colt Python. I don't care if it's an old one or a new one. The new ones are a little bit better priced while still scratching that Colt Python itch. Definitely in the royal blue finish, because I think that's just a necessity in the Colt Python. The Colt Python is entirely appearance thing for me. Like, there are plenty of other revolvers that I think are more practical than a Colt Python, but the Colt Python is iconic for its time period. It's iconic for the golden age of wheel guns. And longtime viewers of the channel know that I'm a big fan of wheel guns. Now, if we're going for a more practical wheel gun, then we wind up looking at this Ruger Security 6 chambered in 357 and 38 special. I grew up with the Ruger Security 6. I've shot this one extensively. I've shot other versions of the Security 6 extensively. This is definitely one of my favorite revolvers. I actually traded a Glock 27 for this particular handgun. And then to finish things off with the Smith & Wesson Model 15, the combat masterpiece. An absolutely fantastic revolver. It was Smith & Wesson Performance Center before there was Smith & Wesson Performance Center. And I've passed on a couple of these over the years. One of these days, I will finally have the right combination of like money and availability to be able to pick up one of these. But I am a huge fan of the Model 15, and I cannot wait to add it to my collection. Chambered in 38, if I didn't say that already. All right, backpack guns. Some of you might know, especially when we looked at my EDC video, which if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description, that I like carrying a gun in a backpack. So for that, there's a couple of options that I would like to be able to add to this. The MP5K. I am a longtime fan of the MP5K. And in this case, I would like to be able to add a small telescoping stock, so we are talking about an SBR, and a couple of other attributes in order to be able to make it more applicable for my fighting purposes. Light, optic, all that type of thing. But that would be an incredibly compact and easy to take around backpack gun. Going from there into the CZ Scorpion. I like the CZ Scorpion. I've passed on some CZ Scorpions that I kind of wish I had not. I think the new K version is probably the best edition of the CZ Scorpion because it's getting back to like the VZ63, which is not a 100% like dead ringer for. The VZ63 is, or VZ61, excuse me, is substantially smaller and really more of a machine pistol than a true submachine gun. However, the CZ Scorpion kind of takes that same overall concept and makes it more applicable with like modern handling, 9mm chambering, all those types of things. And then also the MPX. And the only reason I've thrown the MPX in here is once again because of guns that I've worked around. This last serious amount of work that I did, we were having issue getting a hold of our issued weapons, so a lot of us wound up utilizing stuff that was kind of locally sourced, and that included MPXs, excuse me. So I would like to add that purely as just a homage to that period of my life. Well, also, I mean, it's got AR-15 type handling characteristics and all that kind of stuff. They're good guns. They're just really expensive, and that's my biggest issue and why I would generally pick a CZ Scorpion over an MPX. But in this case, money is not a concern. All right, Milsurps. Let's go ahead and start talking about some Milsurps. The Mauser 98K. Enough said. Incredibly iconic 7.92 by 57mm chambered rifle. They're expensive, but every World War II collection, every Milsurp collection needs to have a Mauser 98K, and I presently do not have one. I do have a Swedish M38 Mauser chambered in 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, so of course it would be in my 6.5 Swede. This is my favorite military surplus rifle, fictitious arsenal. Like, this is a wonderfully flat shooting cartridge. It's an incredibly accurate rifle. This gun punches well above its capabilities, and it's really one of the more forgotten Mausers, which is really unfortunate. It's overshadowed by the previously mentioned Mauser 98K. The M1 Garand, of course. What military collection would be complete without one? That's why mine is not complete, because I do not have an M1 Garand. However, I have previously reviewed an M1 Garand, which if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description. The M1 Carbine. This is my Plainfield Machine Company M1 Carbine, chambered .30 carbine, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. This is an absolutely fantastic rifle in general, let alone, like, okay, a PMC is not necessarily a surplus rifle, but it still captures the overall handling and all the things. It's just not actually a service rifle in this case. But what a fantastic, handy little carbine. And longtime viewers of the channel know that I absolutely love short, handy carbines. That's the thing that gets me going, is lightweight, short rifles that are very easy to the shoulder, very easy to be able to like work around obstacles and corners and all that kind of stuff. Like, the M1 Carbine is an absolute shoe-in for me for that type of application. Mosin Nagant. Longtime viewers of the channel know that my first military surplus rifle that I bought myself was a Mosin Nagant, an M44 carbine, but I have an affinity for Finnish Mosins. This is an M27, chambered in 7.62 by 5.4. This actually showed up in my military surplus shooting challenge, which if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description. The Finns put better sights on these guns. They put a better barrel in these guns. They adjusted the sights into meters instead of arshins, like the original 1891s that they captured, as well as they put better triggers in them. So this is an excellent rifle to take to the range. Though this one's bolt is a little gummy, that's just an issue that you run into with some of the older Finnish Mosins. I recently came across an M28 that was in absolutely fantastic condition for about $600, which to me, that's worth it. Somebody's out there scoffing. We're not talking about a Russian Mosin. We're talking about a Finnish Mosin. They're already a cut above. In addition to the fact that those rifles have appreciated because they are no longer coming in hand over fist like they once were. We've talked about that ad nauseum on the channel. This video's gone super long. I'm not going to spend too much more time on it. Carcanos. I would prefer to have one of the carbine Carcanos, but any Carcano would be acceptable to me. I like the Carcano because I am also a huge fan of underdogs. I have a soft spot for things that get picked on, and the Carcanos and the Mosin Nagants get picked on a lot. I have a Sporterized Carcano, which is coming up for review on the channel. I'm a huge fan of the handling characteristics of the rifle, while understanding that as far as like World War II or any military surplus is concerned, the Carcano is kind of like the moron that tries really, really hard, and you just can't help but feel bad for it. So I would still love to have a Carcano in the collection. You can still find them for fairly decent prices. The ammunition's the issue. The ammunition's quite expensive and a little bit more difficult to come across. 6.5 by 52 Carcano, if I didn't mention that before. And then to round off the Milsurp category, a C96 broom handle. I have always had a love affair with the C96 broom handle. I would prefer it in 9mm because that is more accessible. However, those guns are more expensive, so 7.63 Mauser is also acceptable to me. I have passed on 2 of these guns. I came across one that was supposedly a 9mm for about $400, which something about that didn't sit right with me. That was entirely too cheap. There was something up with that gun, so I passed on it. And then also a 7.63 Mauser that was for about the same price, around $400, that had an issue with the safety. The safety just didn't function. So I wound up not necessarily falling all over myself to get that gun, and somebody else picked it up before I even considered putting the funds together to buy it. All right, guys, final subject, and that is a bear gun or a woods defense gun. And for this, I made 2 selections. First, this Ruger Red Hawk, chambered in 44 Magnum. Got something on my hand. Did I cut myself again? It would appear so. Huh, interesting. This Ruger Red Hawk, chambered in 44 Magnum. I'm a huge fan of the 44 Magnum cartridge. I'm a huge fan of the heavy framed revolvers chambered in 44 Magnum. And I think it would be an excellent bear defense gun. A semi-automatic version would be the Glock 20C, standing for compensated. I actually ran across one of those in a gun shop not too long ago. I am a huge fan of weird Glocks, and a compensated Glock 20 is definitely, a factory compensated Glock 20 is definitely very interesting to me. A lot of people complain that those vents could potentially blind you in low light situations. However, first off, there's quite a few YouTube reviewers who have tested that and found it not necessarily to be true. And in my opinion, if I'm running 10mm, which is pretty close to the minimum that I would want to take up against a bear, I would like to make sure that it tracks as flat as it can so that I can stack shots in critical areas of a bear, because I know it's going to take a lot of ammo to put it down. Like, the 10mm is capable. There's a lot of energy coming out of a 10mm handgun. However, bears are big. And I don't want to mess around with like enough. Overkill is definitely underrated in this case. All right, guys. This is the longest video that I think I've ever put together on the channel, or very close to. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I hope you guys found this content interesting. If you asked me about this in a month, I would give you a completely different list, or a very much so different list. But I think we've pretty exhaustively covered this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting. That's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.